Hello, everyone. Welcome and good afternoon. My name is Jeremy Leffler, and I work in the policy office at the National Science Foundation. And it's my pleasure to welcome you this afternoon to the continuing conference, the NSF Virtual Grants Conference. I'm now pleased to present this session, which will cover the programs in the NSF Directorate for Education and Human Resources.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Jeremy, for that introduction. My name is Nigamanth, Sridhar, and I serve as a program director in the Division of Graduate Education in the Directorate of Education and Human Resources at the National Science Foundation. I'm going to spend the next several minutes describing the various programs and funding opportunities available at NSF's EHR Directorate. EHR's collective work spans three underlying themes. Our programs aim to enhance the preparation, increase the participation, and ensure the contributions of individuals underrepresented and underserved in the STEM enterprise, improve STEM learning and learning environments and understandings of them such that all are prepared to both contribute to the STEM workforce of and benefit from the industries of today and the future. EHR houses experts that span the range of STEM education and STEM research in education, for example, broadening participation, graduate education, undergraduate education, as well as K-12 education, which benefits the agency as a whole. So this is a busy slide, and I don't mean to go through all these programs on this slide, but this is a nice roadmap for you to see the breadth of programs at EHR and how it is structured into four divisions. The Division on Research and Learning in Informal and Formal Settings, DRL, the Division of Undergraduate Education, DUE, the Division of Graduate Education, DGE, and the Division of Human Resource Development, HRD. I'm going to spend the rest of my time in this talk providing more details on these divisions and about each of these programs. You'll have access to these slides, and you can use this slide to get a high-level overview of all EHR programs. Education research is critical in helping us resolve some of the most persistent problems we continue to see with learning and teaching in STEM disciplines broadly. So starting off with the Division of Research on Learning in Formal and Informal Settings, or DRL, this division provides funding for foundational research to advance understanding of STEM learning and teaching. DRL also funds work in the design, implementation, and study of learning environments and the study of technologies intended to engage and enable STEM learning for all students. So I want, before I start talking about the program on this slide here, I just want to explain the format of most of these slides that are going to follow. We're going to talk about one program at a time, but just so you know, for each program, I'm going to tell you what the solicitation number is, include a link to that solicitation on the bottom left corner here, and also tell you when the next deadline or funding, next deadline for submission is going to be. So this will be familiar to you for most of the rest of this talk. So the AZLE program, or the Advancing Informal STEM Learning Program, seeks to advance new approaches to and evidence-based understanding of the design and development of STEM learning opportunities for the public in informal environments. The program provides multiple pathways for broadening access to and engagement in STEM learning experiences, advancing innovative research on and assessment of STEM learning in informal environments, and engaging the public of all ages in learning STEM in informal environments. There are 6 types of projects that AZLE supports: pilots and feasibility studies, research and service to practice, innovations in development, broad implementation, literature reviews, syntheses or meta-analyses, and conferences. Again, the next deadline for submission for this program is in January. So it's NSF 20-607. The next program is the Computer Science for All program, or CS for All RPP. This is NSF 20-539. The deadline is usually in February. The second Wednesday in February is the submission deadline. And the program aims to provide all US students with the opportunity to participate in computer science and computational thinking education in their schools at the pre-K through 12 levels. With this solicitation, the NSF focuses on both research and researcher-practitioner partnerships, or RPPs, that foster the research and development needed to bring CS and CT to all schools. Specifically, this solicitation aims to provide, one, high school teachers with the preparation, professional development, and ongoing support they need to teach rigorous computer science courses. Two, pre-K through 8 teachers with the instructional materials and preparation they need to integrate CS and CT into their teaching. And 3, schools and districts with the resources needed to define and evaluate multi-grade pathways in CS and CT. This program also accepts proposals that are focused on research about learning and teaching of introductory computer science. The next program is the DRK-12 program, or the Discovery Research Pre-K through 12 program. Deadline is in October. October 6th of this year is the next deadline. And this program seeks to significantly enhance the learning and teaching of STEM fields by pre-K through 12 students and teachers through research and development of STEM education, innovations, and approaches. Projects in the DRK through 12 program build on fundamental research in STEM education and prior research and development efforts that provide theoretical and empirical justification for proposed projects. Projects should result in research-informed and field-tested outcomes and products that inform teaching and learning. Teachers and students who participate in DRK-12 studies are expected to enhance their understanding and use of STEM content, practices, and skills. The COVID-19 pandemic, of course, had a huge impact on K-12 systems, and this program also funded a number of what are called rapid awards. These are projects that are focused on a problem that needs to be addressed rapidly, which is what we saw last year with the pandemic. The next program here is the iTest program, or the Innovative Technology Experiences for Students and Teachers program. The deadline for submission for this one is in August, at the end of the summer. The goal of this program is to advance educational innovations that motivate and prepare pre-K through 12 learners for computationally intensive industries of the future. This is an applied research and development program designed to broaden participation in STEM and computational thinking careers and career pathways through providing pre-K through 12 grade youth with technology-rich learning experiences in both formal and informal settings. There's 5 design elements to these projects that reviewers usually look for, and these are innovative uses of technologies, innovative learning experiences, STEM workforce development, strategies for broadening participation, and strategic partnerships. The Research on Emerging Technologies for Teaching and Learning, or RETL program, and by now you're getting the idea that NSF really likes acronyms and short forms of long program names. But the RETL program is intended to fund exploratory and synergistic research in emerging technologies to include, but not limited to, artificial intelligence, robotics, immersive or augmented technologies for teaching and learning in the future. The program accepts proposals that focus on learning, teaching, or a combination of both. The scope of the program is broad, with special interest in diverse learner-educated populations, contexts, and content, including teaching and learning in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM, and in foundational areas that enable STEM learning. The deadline for submission for this program is in October 18th of this year. So moving on, we're going to next spend the next several minutes talking about the programs in the Division of Undergraduate Education, or DUE, which supports the design, development, and study of innovative STEM learning environments to improve learning for all undergraduate students. The Advanced Technological Education program, with a deadline of October, the first Thursday in October, is focused on innovation in education in two-year colleges. The broad focus of this program is in creating highly qualified science and engineering technicians for advancing technology fields that drive our nation's economy. Most of the work funded by the ATE program happens in two-year public, community, and technical colleges. The next program here is a broad program called IUSE, or Improving Undergraduate STEM Education, the IUSE EHR program. And I'm noting that this IUSE program with the extra EHR attached to it, because we're going to come back and look at IUSE a couple other times used in a couple other programs. I'll make sure to point those out as well. But this program broadly looks at discovery of new evidence-based interventions to improve undergraduate STEM teaching and learning of all kinds. The focus of the program is in transforming institutions and STEM communities through the adoption and implementation of best practices in undergraduate STEM learning, as well as in STEM teaching. Supporting diversity and inclusion in STEM by advancing knowledge and adoption of effective STEM education for all is a primary focus of the broadening participation goals of the IUSE program. The SSTEM program, or the NSF Scholarships in STEM program, deadlines in March, so the deadline just passed a couple months ago, but it'll be due the next in March of 2022. This program supports is a scholarship program that is specifically focused on providing financial support to students with unmet financial need. So, the institutions get grants to provide these scholarships. They may have merit-based criteria as well for these scholarships, but the focus of the program is to ensure that all students, regardless of financial ability, are able to achieve their accomplishments in terms of STEM degrees and degree programs, and that's what this particular program is specifically focused on. Students usually work on learning research skills in addition to completing their STEM degrees as part of this scholarship program. Addressing the critical need for highly effective K-12 STEM teachers and teacher leaders is an important problem that NSF is focused on. The Robert Noyce Teacher Scholarship Program is designed to ensure the future security of the STEM education workforce. This scholarship program is provided to institutions to encourage more diverse individuals to enter the teaching professions. And there is a service requirement that scholars will need to satisfy after graduation. So folks can get a scholarship to study education, and then when they leave, they need to go and serve in a high needs school district as part of their service requirement. So EHR has made a major commitment to increase its support of the nation's two-year institutions. Recently, the Directorate released a program description aimed at supporting systemic approaches to advancing inclusive and equitable STEM education practices. The Directorate will invest $20 million to support bold and transformative projects that focus on current STEM issues and future structures and functions of STEM learning and teaching at two-year colleges. In terms of STEM disciplines, in addition to proposals in traditional STEM fields at two-year colleges, NSF particularly encourages submissions to the disciplines of national priority, such as quantum information science, artificial intelligence, robotics, process engineering, and cybersecurity. In terms of scale and budget, these projects may focus on different timescales from both near-term as well as long-term challenges and opportunities, and can range from small exploratory investigations to large comprehensive projects. Proposal budgets should be commensurate with the scope and scale of the proposed work and level of work. So the next group of programs that I'll talk about come from the Division of Graduate Education, which is focused on preparing graduate students into tomorrow's leaders in the STEM fields. The first program that I'll talk about is NSF's flagship Graduate Research Fellowship Program. The GRFP is the only program at NSF that makes grant awards directly to students. This is a 5-year fellowship that includes 3 years of financial support for graduate students who are or will be pursuing a research-based master's and doctoral degrees in eligible fields of study. And eligible fields of study simply means any field for which NSF provides research funding. There is no postgraduate study service requirement, for the GRFP. And the focus of the fellowship is to provide financial independence for students who have an interest in pursuing a graduate degree. The program provides a $34,000 annual stipend, as well as a $12,000 cost of education allowance, which is paid directly to the institution. The Innovations in Graduate Education program supports projects that pilot, test, and validate innovative and potentially transformative approaches to STEM graduate education. Projects that contribute to the knowledge base about new and effective graduate education approaches and help transform graduate education. The deadline for submission for this program is in March, the next one coming up in March 2022. The NSF Research Traineeship Program, or the NRT program, which accepts proposals in September, is focused on providing institutional training grant awards to graduate programs that are focused on developing new and inclusive models of STEM graduate training in areas of convergence research. Projects provide research-based master's and PhD students with the skills, knowledge, and competencies to pursue a range of careers in STEM. The next program is the Cyber Core Scholarship for Service program. This program accepts proposals in July. July 28th is the deadline for the next submission. This program is the federal government's premier program, workforce development program in preparing the future cybersecurity workforce. This program is aligned with the US strategy to develop a superior cybersecurity workforce. Grant awards are made to institutions of higher education who then turn around and provide scholarships to students who are enrolled in full-time programs in undergraduate and graduate programs in cybersecurity. After graduation, scholarship recipients are required to go to the government and work in a cybersecurity role for a federal, state, local, or tribal government organization for a period at least equal to the length of their scholarship. The scholarship awards are similar to the GRFP in terms of the size. That is, they provide both tuition support as well as a stipend. So the next program, the Secure and Trustworthy Cyberspace Program, SATC, is aligned with the SFS program and supports cybersecurity education research. SATC is a cross-agency program that includes 5 different directorates from NSF. And EHR runs the education designation in SATC, which will fund projects that are focused entirely on cybersecurity education. This program accepts proposals throughout the year. There is no deadline for submission, so you just submit your proposal when it is ready. and the idea of these proposals are to address cybersecurity and privacy issues in education across all fields that pertain to these research topics. So next, we'll talk about programs in the Human Resource Development Division, or HRD, which provides support to grow the innovative US STEM workforce by supporting the inclusion and success of individuals currently underrepresented in STEM. This includes institutions that serve them. HRD funds work to conduct research on effective mechanisms to achieve these goals. The increasing participation and advancement of women in academic science and engineering careers, or ADVANCE program, is focused on, like the name says, focused on increasing the participation and advancement of women in science and engineering academic careers. Institutional awards are made to create environments that address the systemic gender-based inequities that are commonly visible in institutions across the country. So the focus of this program is to create systemic change strategies so that the institutional policies and structures are better able to accommodate women faculty on their STEM workforce. This program accepts proposals in August. Actually, there's a letter of intent that's required in August, and then proposal deadlines will come later. Please look at the solicitation for the actual proposal deadline. But a letter of intent is required in order for you to submit a proposal to this program. The next program is the Alliances for Graduate Education and the Professoriate program, or the AGAP program. This program has a very simple goal, which is to increase the number of minority faculty in STEM. And in particular, the way that this program gets to that goal is by providing financial support as well as academic support to students who are underrepresented in STEM disciplines during their pursuit of doctoral degrees as well as postdoctoral programs, and then giving them a pathway that can then eventually have them enter the workforce as academic faculty at higher education institutions. Again, this program requires a letter of intent that's due in June with a proposal submission date that follows later on, which you can see in the solicitation. The CREST program, or the Centers of Research Excellence in Science and Technology program, provides support to enhance the research capabilities of minority-serving institutions by establishing centers that integrate education and research. There's a couple different kinds of center awards that CREST provides, and therefore there are multiple deadlines. So I'm not listing a deadline on the slide here. Please look at the solicitation. But there are specific categories of awards that support projects at MSIs, or minority-serving institutions, that demonstrate a strong research and education base, a compelling vision for research infrastructure improvement, and a comprehensive plan with the necessary elements to achieve and sustain national competitiveness in a defined area of science or engineering research. The next program is the HBCU UP program, or the Historically Black Colleges and Universities undergraduate program. And this program supports development, implementation, and study of evidence-based innovative models and approaches to preparing HBCU undergraduates for the STEM workforce. The goal of this program is to bolster STEM faculty research capacity at HBCUs, as well as provide professional development, and encompasses broadening participation research in STEM education. Again, this program has multiple deadlines, and I'd encourage you to go looking at the solicitation for actual deadlines. The Lewis-Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation, or the LSAMP program, has two deadlines, one in June and one in November, for different kinds of projects. But the goal of this program is to transform STEM education by supporting African American, Hispanic American, American Indian, Alaskan Native, Native Hawaiian, and Native Pacific Islander students. The goal of the program is to provide a successful transfer pathway for students to go from 2-year to 4-year institutions in the form of bridge to baccalaureate, as well as providing undergraduate access to high quality research in terms of the RU program, and finally providing a seamless transition of students from 2-year or 4-year undergraduate programs into graduate programs, and that's the bridge to the doctorate. So taken together, the goal of the LSAMP program is to provide multiple pathways or on-ramps, as well as off-ramps, for students to be able to enter STEM programs and go as far as they would like to go, or as their goals desire them to go. The inclusion across the nation of communities of learners, of underrepresented discoverers in engineering. Again, NSF includes, a really nice acronym, right? NSF includes is a program that was launched as one of NSF's 10 big ideas, and has the expressed mission to enhance US leadership in discovery and innovation, focused on NSF's commitment to equity, inclusion, and broadening participation in STEM at scale. There's two major tenets to this program. One is the broadening participation in STEM at scale, that is, projects that are focused on realizing systemic change at large national scales, as well as building a collaborative infrastructure That is, organizations coming together to develop a shared goal, mutually reinforcing activities, objectives, and measures to map progress, a mechanism for continuous communication, and a potential for expansion, sustainability, and scale. Similar to the HBCU UP program, which is focused on historically Black colleges and universities, the TCUP program is focused on tribal colleges and universities and has similar goals, but specifically focused on tribal colleges and universities. Again, there's 4 different kinds of grant submissions that this program accepts, and there are multiple deadlines. There is a track of the program that seeks to support transformational STEM instruction and research, the ISTI program. There's the targeted STEM infusion projects, which are similar to the capacity excellence projects, but are smaller in size and impact. There are the small grants for research, which support STEM or STEM education research at tribal colleges, and the tribal colleges and universities enterprise advancement centers, or TE centers, that are intended to create paradigm shifting support to the TCUP institution as an intellectual resource and for future development. So the programs that I've talked about so far specifically address STEM education programs in contexts that are defined by the 4 divisions in EHR. However, there are persistent, vexing problems in STEM education that may not fit nicely into one of our divisional programs. There are deep inequities in our education system that have been caused by disparities of so many different kinds. Technologies such as artificial intelligence are starting to play an increasing role in how STEM teaching and learning occurs. The future workforce needs and skills are wholly different from the workforce needs of yesterday and today, and that means fundamental research in curriculum and how it is taught. And of course, this pandemic that we're living through right now has upended almost every facet of our education infrastructure. There are a few more programs that I'd like to highlight that are directorate-wide in EHR or even NSF-wide. The Faculty Early Career Development Program, or the Career Program, is a foundation-wide activity that offers the National Science Foundation's most prestigious awards in support of early career faculty who have the potential to serve as academic role models in research and education to lead advances in the mission of their department or organization. Activities pursued by early career faculty should build a firm foundation for a lifetime of leadership in integrating education and research. NSF encourages submission of career proposals from early career faculty at all career eligible organizations, and especially encourages women, members of underrepresented minority groups, and persons with disabilities to apply. This program is unique in that there can only be a single PI for the project, that is the individual that is detailing their career plans. And the PI must meet some eligibility requirements, which are that they have to be an assistant professor with a tenure track or equivalent position and can only submit 3 times at most. The program is intended to create an integrated research and education plan that lays the foundation for a lifetime of contributions. The EHR Core Research Program, or the ECR program, with deadline in October, invites proposals for fundamental research, both basic research as well as use-inspired basic research that advances knowledge in one or more of the 3 research tracks. And those are research on STEM learning and learning environments, research on broadening participation in STEM fields, and research on STEM workforce development. The ECR program places emphasis on the rigorous development of theory and accumulation of knowledge to inform efforts to address challenges in STEM interest, learning, and participation for all groups and all ages in formal as well as informal settings. This emphasis includes research on advancing evaluative methodologies to support research efforts funded through ECR. ECR also has a second track called BICSR, or Building Capacity in STEM Education Research. Again, deadline in October. And this program is intended to support activities that enable early career and mid-career researchers to acquire the expertise and skills to conduct rigorous fundamental research in STEM education. Put in more simple terms, this program is intended to provide capacity building grants for PIs who haven't had a previous experience in STEM education research and would like to enter that field. This nicely complements the career program in terms of mission and focus. Again, like with most other NSF programs, in particular EHR programs, this program welcomes proposals from mid-career faculty and investigators from a wide variety of academic as well as non-academic organizations. The IU's HSI program, or simply the HSI program, is intended to enhance the quality of undergraduate education at Hispanic serving institutions, or HSIs. Deadline for this is at the end of the summer in August. And the goal of the program is to increase retention and graduation rates of undergraduate students pursuing degrees in STEM at HSIs, as well as building capacity in undergraduate STEM education at HSIs. And these institutions that typically don't receive high levels of NSF grant funding for research programs. The Racial Equity in STEM Education program description, or EHR Racial Equity, is a program description that was published recently with the goal of supporting bold, groundbreaking, and potentially transformative projects addressing systemic racism in STEM and STEM education. The next deadline is in July, and there are multiple deadlines for this program description as well. There's two major tenets to this program. Proposals should advance racial equity in STEM education and workforce development through research, both fundamental as well as applied and practice. And the proposals must be led by or developed and led in authentic partnership with individuals and communities that are most impacted by the inequities caused by systemic racism. And this program is, accepts proposals broadly across all contexts where STEM education occurs, including but not limited to pre-K through 12 schools, 2-year and 4-year undergraduate and graduate institutions, municipal organizations, STEM workplaces, informal STEM contexts such as museums, community organizations, and media. To lessen the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on STEM research and education, this new funding opportunity, which is published as a DCL, or a Dear Colleague letter, is intended to provide supplemental funding for postdoctoral researchers to mitigate COVID-19 impacts on research career progression. Again, there's no deadline for this program, and proposals will be accepted on a rolling basis all the way to the end of this calendar year, December 31st, 2021. This funding opportunity is intended to support research careers of new or current postdoctoral researchers. Funding will be provided to sustain career progression and mitigate reductions of research and research productivity of early career researchers disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. This DCL welcomes requests for supplemental funding to support postdoctoral researchers who are working or will work at institutions that have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. And what I mean by supplemental funding is that this is open to all PIs who currently have an active research grant, and folks can ask for a supplemental grant to extend the time for a postdoc researcher. So I'm going to conclude by talking about an agency-wide initiative focused on the industries of the future. These 5 areas that you see on the slide here: biotechnology, artificial intelligence, quantum information science, advanced manufacturing, and next generation wireless are areas, are initiatives that NSF as an agency is looking to see in terms of how these areas are going to transform the research landscape in the United States, as well as future workforce in the United States. EHR as a directorate supports all of these areas in terms of the programs that we offer, and you'll see threads of these areas across all of the various programs that I just talked about over the last several minutes. And with that, I'll stop and answer any questions that you may have. We have received a number of questions, that we got through during registration, and I'll try to address them in the next few minutes. But then we're also looking for questions that are submitted in this live session right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Sridhar. We have a number of questions here, and before we get to them, I would encourage folks, we have a little bit of time. If you do have questions, please submit them in the Q&A, and we'll use the time that we have to get to them. So I'm just going to go down from the top and read these for you and for the folks that are listening. The first one here is, how does NSF define systemic racism?
Sure. So this is a question that's pertaining to the program description on racial equity in STEM education. NSF does not define systemic racism. That program description, if you go look at the synopsis, or actually the entire program description, there is no definition of the term systemic racism or race. The intention is for you as the PI community to define the term for yourself for your project. We recognize that there are several different interpretations and definitions of that term, and they may apply in different contexts. And we're looking for you in your proposals to define what it means to you and your project, and define it that way.
Okay. The next question is, would academic literacy be considered, sorry, my Q&A just jumped around. Sorry. Would academic literacy be considered a foundational academic skill for STEM-specific disciplines? The proposed project relies on scientific texts as well as literary works to build student academic vocabulary.
Great, that's a great question. So I, in response to one of another question in the chat, I actually posted a link to the list of all areas that NSF supports as research areas. So you should look in there. But in answer to your question of whether academic literacy counts as an area for EHR funding, again, I'll give the standard but probably less than satisfying answer of it depends. It depends on where the context is for your particular project. And if you can show a demonstrable link between building academic literacy to the research questions and the goals that you are setting up for the particular project that you have. So again, going back to what you may have heard in another part of the conference, there are two review criteria that all proposals are measured under: intellectual merit and broader impact. And as long as you can show how building academic literacy contributes to the intellectual merit and or the broader impact of the project you're building, I would say it counts.
Okay, this next question is a little longer, and it's asking, what about research focused on topics that fall under STEAM, or science, technology, engineering, arts, and math? That is, they combine aspects of STEM and the arts. I don't know if I'll read all of that.
I can look at the question here as well and pick it up from there. So yeah, I mean, this is actually again a pretty straightforward and an interesting question. The inclusion of the arts in STEM disciplines is certainly an area that many programs across EHR will support. Some that come to mind right away are the DRK-12 program, Discovery Research in K-12, where if you're talking about integrating these disciplines, that's absolutely one that would fit. The CS for All program, or the Computer Science for All program, could be another fit. There are, or if you're looking at the undergraduate level, the IUS program will also be a good fit for those kinds of interdisciplinary projects.
Okay, and the next question is asking about the NOISE program that you discussed, and they're asking at what level do undergraduates need to be at in their STEM studies?
So again, this is in the solicitation, and I'll use this as a plug to say that before you submit a proposal to NSF, actually before you begin preparing a proposal to NSF, please read the solicitation carefully. This is in the solicitation for noise. There are multiple tracks for the noise proposals. Tracks, I believe it's tracks 1 and 2 that specifically support undergraduate students, and both of them require the student to be at least a junior level in order to receive the scholarship. There is also a track that supports master teachers, and those can be students that are either in undergraduate programs or more commonly in graduate programs in education programs, in education colleges.
Okay, looks like we have a duplicate question here. I'm going to go to the next one, which is, what does it mean to indicate a program for the career program? Is that the program that provides the funding for the grant? And I will just say before you answer that we do have a session later this week on the career program. So after you read the solicitation, come to that session and you'll get more information specifically about that.
Yeah, and I can give a quick answer here. So again, when you submit your proposal through Fastlane or through research.gov, actually research.gov is the system that you should begin using. It is delightful to use, both for you as PIs as well as for us as program officers. But when you go into the system to initiate your proposal, you will have a chance to select what program it goes to, and whether or not that program is the one that provides funding. Is less relevant to you. More relevant to you is who's reviewing your proposal. Who are the people who are going to read your proposal and provide review and recommendations to NSF? And you want your proposal to be read by experts that are closest to your field. And that's why it's important to pick the right program and the right division at NSF, because if your proposal ends up in front of people that are not necessarily experts in your field, it may not get reviewed as well. So picking the right program ensures that you will get the most fair and most appropriate review.
Okay, and I'm going to try and summarize this next question, which is, how do you decide where to submit your proposal to which program? What's the best approach to take there?
So again, read the solicitations, but no, I'm just being facetious. But after you've read the solicitation, let's say that you read, let's say that you have a project that uses technology in both K-12 schools and in undergraduate programs, right? So right off the top of the bat, that there could be some DRK-12 elements, there could be some IUS elements, there could be some RETL elements, let's say, right? What I would do if I were in your position as a PI is write up a one-page description of your idea. And send it to a program officer in one of those programs and say, hey, what do you think about this idea? Is this a good fit, right? One of the key things that we as program officers at NSF do is to foster the PI community and be helpful in terms of developing your projects and helping you develop the projects that are most suited for our funding programs. So look at the solicitation, make sure that your project aligns with what the solicitation is asking for. But if you're still not able to actually, make that determination, use us. Ask us the question, and we will absolutely be able to provide you guidance for whether or not a program is a good fit. We will not be able to tell you if it's a good proposal, right? Because we don't make funding decisions without there being peer review and panel review. So what we can tell you is whether or not your idea is a good fit or is in scope for a particular program.
Okay, this next question, I might have scrolled past this, but the person is asking if it's okay to submit the same project to different programs because they can see it fitting in several different programs. And I'll just mention that you can indicate to us where you think your proposal will fit, and our program staff, they talk to each other, right? And they will then determine the right place for your proposal. But please go ahead and from your experience.
Sure. And this is so yes, please indicate that you have you're trying to if you have a single proposal and you'd like it to be reviewed by two different programs at the same time, you can absolutely indicate that. In the research.gov system, when you're submitting in your cover sheet, you can actually indicate multiple programs, and you can even suggest reviewers. Now, but beyond that, I'll present a warning. You cannot submit two separate proposals at the same time to the agency, right? There cannot be two separate cover sheet proposals that are submitted to different programs. If that's the case, then more than likely, both of those proposals will be returned to you without review. What Jeremy indicated and what I just said is that there is only one submission action, but in that one submission action, you're indicating to the program staff that you would like your proposal to be considered by more than one program. That's okay, right? Because there is only one single proposal action that is in the system. But if you submit two separate proposals, one, let's say to Rettel, one, let's say to DRK 12 at the same time, those proposals will more than likely be returned to you without review.
Good. Can students supported by the LS-AMP program apply for an NSF Graduate Research Fellowship Program award?
Most likely, yes. Again, let me just clarify that. If the student is receiving an LS-AMP award, actually, let me pull that back a little bit, right? Let me just clarify this a little bit. If a student is receiving an LS-AMP award to go to graduate school, they cannot also apply for the GRFP simply because of timing. Because the GRFP, a student can apply for it while they're an undergraduate student or when they've just started a graduate program. If they've already started a graduate program and they're already receiving LS-AMP funding, then that will more than likely have knocked them out of contention in terms of eligibility. But if you are eligible for the GRFP based on the GRFP requirements, then you should be able to apply. But again, for that, before you apply for the GRFP, there is a very rich set of frequently asked questions on the nsfgrfp.org website. Please go read that carefully. And there are very, very stringent requirements on who can apply and what track you have to apply to. So please pay attention to those before you begin your application, because if it doesn't fit those eligibility criteria, your proposal may actually not get reviewed. Okay,
and this question they're asking for programs that target two-year institutions cover the transfer preparedness into four-year institutions. Would a collaborative proposal between a 2- and 4-year institution be considered?
If you're thinking about the ATE program in particular, the Advanced Technological Education program, that program supports grants to institutions that are two-year institutions that are typically community colleges or technical colleges. There may be a transfer preparedness component built into it, but that may not be the ATE program may not be the best fit for those kinds of proposals. The IU's EHR program would be a better fit. Again, I'm just drawing huge speculations here. If you have a specific question, we'd be happy to answer that question for you. But in general, based on the question that is just on the Q&A here, it'll probably be a better fit for the IU's program because it is more broad. There can be collaborative proposals that include two-year colleges and four-year institutions submitted to IU's, but the ATE program will not take will typically not look at a collaborative proposal between a two-year college and a four-year institution. Those are benefits for IU's.
Okay. Next question is, can a primarily undergraduate institution apply for an SGR? This is part of the teacup solicitation.
Yeah, so I was actually trying to look up that carefully. I saw this question show up in the Q&A a little while ago. So I'm actually going to punt on that question a little bit because I'm not sure I'm going to give you the most accurate answer. So you're now talking about intersectionality in kinds of institutions, right? I mean, you could have a primarily undergraduate institution that is not a tribal college or university, in which case they're no longer eligible for the SGR designation in TCUP. However, there are other programs and other solicitations that also have similar things to the SGR designation in TCUP. So again, look for those for primarily undergraduate institutions, and that may be a better fit.
Also would mention that I do believe that the teacup solicitation will be renewed very soon. So do keep an eye out for that as well. Okay, if we are working with non-traditional students in the SC/ST field, such as senior citizens, which EHR programs are suitable?
So again, this is a broad question. I would start with two programs and then say that you need to go look at solicitations more carefully. One is the ASL program, which is Advancing Informal STEM Learning. Depending on the settings that you're talking about, it could be a good fit for ASL. The other is the EHR core research, which I'm actually seeing another question pop up about ECR. But EHR core research is the broad umbrella of all education research in the EHR Directorate. So either one of those could be good fits. Again, I would encourage you to write a short summary of your proposal and contact a program officer in one of those two programs.
Okay, since you mentioned the EHR core research, this questioner is asking, would career awardees be eligible to participate?
Well, so again, I'm looking at the full question. It says that you can submit career to ECR. If you're saying that you've already received a career award and you're now wanting to apply to EHR, absolutely, right? I mean, these are independent programs. As long as these are different proposals, you perhaps received a career award or a grant a few years ago, and now you're a mid-career scientist and you'd like to submit a proposal to the EHR core research program. Absolutely, right? I mean, as long as you have a strong idea that has independent intellectual merit and broader impact, you're certainly eligible.
Okay, and back to the Racial Equity in STEM Education program, does it require undergraduate participation?
No, it doesn't require undergraduate participation. It could include undergraduate participation. Again, that particular Racial Equity in STEM Education program is a program description, which is that unlike a solicitation, which presents a whole number of deviations from what we call the PAPG, which is the proposals and awards and procedures,
policies and procedures guide.
Yes, I got it. So the PAPG, lists all the requirements of what you need to have in a complete NSF plan. Typically, solicitations are mostly deviations, are describing deviations from the PAPG. This being a program description, there are no deviations from the PAPG. So whatever you see in the PAPG is fair game and allowable in the program description. So again, specifically, it does not require undergraduate participation, but if your project is designed around an undergraduate program, that makes sense.
It's an important note to highlight. When you see the words program solicitation, that should be a clue to you that there is a deviation somewhere, and it might be in the eligibility restrictions. It might limit the number of proposals that an institution can submit, or that a PI or a co-PI could be a part of a certain number of proposals. So just keep that in mind when you see program solicitation.
And the most common deviations are when a solicitation says you can ask for a specific budget or a specific number of years, maximum years, because the PAPG does not have those limitations.
So this asks, what are examples of social, behavioral, and economic applied research for the EHR racial equity program? Would social work education research be appropriate?
So I'm going to answer those as two separate questions. For the first question of what are examples, we don't have examples yet. This is a brand new program description. The very first deadline for submission is July 13th, which is in 5 or 6 weeks now. So there are no examples yet. But if you look in that program description, you can send a one-pager to an email address at NSF, and we'll be happy to give you some feedback about your idea. For the second question of would social work education research be appropriate, I'm actually going to expand that question a little bit and say, would X education research be appropriate? I mean, any field it might be. Again, go look at the list of areas that NSF supports. Any area that NSF supports would be applicable as long as NSF will support an area in terms of education research. The racial equity program description will also support those areas.
Okay, and someone is asking if we can have a list of NSF program officers along with their contact information. And yes, you can, because we are all listed. Every NSF staff member and their contact information is listed on the NSF website. And if you're looking at a specific funding opportunity, you will see all of the associated cognizant program officers who work with that program. So you can find our phone numbers and our email addresses. Okay, next question is, how is next generation wireless supported through EHR?
So that's a great question. And again, I listed 5 areas as the industries of the future, and next gen wireless is one of those. And those are cross-cutting areas that span all directorates at the agency. So there might be and so typically when you're talking about those kinds of large projects, there are probably elements or components of a particular project that are supported by EHR in addition to some other directorate. If it's next generation wireless, it's probably an engineering project or a size project that EHR also participates in. So that's the way that they would be supported.
Okay, we've got time for just a couple more questions. Is there a new ATE program solicitation with a submission deadline this October?
So again, if it's not already on the web, I couldn't tell you if there is going to be a new solicitation or not. The ATE program, again, just check the website. What I can tell you is a deadline cannot be. A deadline will be at least 90 days from the date of publication. So if a new solicitation is published, you will have at least 90 days to respond to that particular solicitation.
Correct. Okay. Let's see, some more questions about deadlines. Let's see, here's one about conference proposals. It says that you have to first speak with a program officer. Why is this? Where is the list of program officers? Well, we've covered where are the program officers, you can find them. I don't believe there's an absolute, in fact, I know there's not an absolute requirement to contact a program officer before submitting a conference proposal, but why might one want to do that?
So a conference, NSF supports conferences in a variety of settings. But when NSF supports a conference, we would like the ability to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts across the agency and things like that, and that are not cross-cutting or at cross purposes with each other. So that's the reason for reaching out to a program officer, and we'll be able to tell you yes or no.
Okay, we are out of time. We're not going to be able to get to all of the remaining questions that are there, but I do want to thank you for presenting today and for all of you for joining. And we will have more sessions the rest of this week. Tomorrow's sessions will cover the merit review process at NSF and also the programs in the Directorate for Engineering. So again, I want to thank you all for attending and have a wonderful rest of your day.